Okay, so welcome back. So first thing I want to do is I want to walk you through how this series is going to be laid out, so you can kind of get a feel for what is this series going to entail. Okay, so I have about a handful of slides here that we're going to take a look at, and I urge you to take your time, watch all this. Just don't jump to the mixing section. Try to watch these in order. This is super important. So let's take a look at what is in this series. What are we going to be learning over the next 10, 12, 15 hours? Let's take a look. So if you look over here at the slide, in this series, we have section one. Section one is going to be called The Sound of Analog Bliss, the history lesson and a primer. Basically, what that means is we're going to spend about 5, maybe 10 minutes talking about analog style plugin emulations. Why are they so popular? Where did they come from? And kind of the backstory to kind of give you the foundation and kind of set you up on a way of thinking of how you should be thinking about these plugins and the way you're going to be using them as we move throughout this series. So we're going to spend some time talking about that because I think it's super, super important that we understand these plugins, why they're popular, how they can benefit you, how are they different from just using any old stock plugin in a DAW, and most importantly, how thinking about your studio as an analog studio as opposed to a digital studio, and we'll talk all about that throughout the series, so don't worry if you don't understand quite what that means yet. You have to understand the beginning, the foundation. That's what section one is going to be. So I urge you to really watch and pay attention to section one and watch it a few times if you need to, so it kind of sinks in. Section two, we're going to turn your DAW into an analog studio. I'm going to take you through my process and how I think about the DAW and how I think about it in analog studio terms. That is super important to getting a really successful mix using these types of plugins. In section three, we're going to take a look at the tape machine and the console, the foundation of the analog sound. Meaning we're going to take a look at what I feel are really the two most important, or the two building blocks to an analog sounding mix, and that is the tape machine emulation and the console or channel strip, or really the console more so than the channel strip, but the console emulation. So that's going to be in section three. In section four, we're going to talk about channel strip mixing. And if people have been following me for a while on YouTube, or have seen any of my past Made Easy mixing products, you know, or my Quick Mix series products, you know that I love using channel strips. And I feel that channel strips are really another one of those secret ingredients to making your mix sound like a well-polished analog style mix. So we're going to talk a lot about channel strip mixing. In section five, we're going to talk about compression and EQ. Not just what is compression and EQ, because I assume that you know what those things are if you're taking this course, but what are the differences between the different types of analog style plug-in emulations of compressors and of EQs, right? We have all kinds of different types of analog style compressors, all different types of analog style plug-in emulations for EQ. We're going to talk about the differences. We're going to look at them. We're going to compare them. We're going to A/B. We're going to do a lot of A/Bing throughout this series so you can listen to the differences. Okay, so that's what we're going to do in section five. In section six, we're going to talk about reverbs and delays and room emulations and how that adds to the overall analog vibe and feel of your mix. In section seven is where most of you are going to be so tempted to just jump to, and I'm going to ask you not to do that. Watch section 1 through 6 before you get to section 7. But in section 7, that's probably going to be the largest section of this series. We're actually going to mix an entire song from start to finish in real time. I have not pre-mixed the song. I've listened to the song in a static mix, rough mix format, because I kind of know, so I know what the song is, but we're going to mix it in real time together. Section 7 is going to be broken down into many subsections, and I'm going to take you through an entire mix. Part of this package, when you bought this series, you should have also received the audio files for that mix so we can mix the song together. So that's super important. Make sure you have all the audio stem files so you can use them in section 7. And then finally in section 8, we're going to go through my final thoughts. We're going to kind of recap what we've done through the first 7 sections. I'm going to have a bunch of different tips and things for you to remember. There will also be a small handful of PDFs that came along with this series that you should have had along with the audio files. So you have some kind of cheat sheets and some cliff notes of this series to kind of refresh your memory as you now try to take all this information that I'm going to work with you on and apply it to your future projects. So that's what we're going to do throughout the series. So it's 8 sections long. Section 7 is going to probably be the longest of the 8 sections, but that's where the fun stuff is going to happen. So now before we start, there's a few things I want to kind of go over with you, and we're going to read this together on the screen. I feel this stuff is super important, and this will help you get the most out of using this new training series. So make sure you're watching this series in 1080p resolution to get the best resolution possible. Most importantly, make sure you're listening on a good set of headphones or studio monitors. Listening to this on a smartphone or a tablet or earbuds will not be very beneficial, as we'll be doing a lot of critical listening throughout this series, and you'll need to be able to hear the subtle changes in the audio. You'll not be able to hear the differences with different plugins on small speakers like a smartphone or an iPad or something like that. Now, this is super, super important. A lot of people will tend to try to watch these on an iPhone or an Android phone or an iPad. And in a lot of my training products, you can still get a lot out of it. And that's an okay thing. For this particular series, I would suggest that you don't do that. You want to be listening to this on good headphones or studio monitors. We are going to be doing a lot of A/Bing between different types of compressors, different types of EQs, different types of tape machines. You're not going to be able to hear the difference, as I said, on these small speakers. So that's super important. The second point is, I urge you to watch this series in order, section by section, and do not skip around or over any section. I know it's tempting to just go find the juicy parts, the fun stuff, where we use all the cool plugins, but without understanding the foundation of why these plugins work and how they can drastically improve your mixes, you are missing out, and you'll not nearly get as much out of this series as you should. Super, super important. I especially urge you to watch section 1, the section that we're coming up on, a few times if you are new to analog style plugins. If you haven't used any of these analog style plugin emulations, you may want to watch section 1 a few times. And section 1 is a primer, and I explain the psychology and the philosophy of analog style mixing. So again, super, super important.